Hello, builders of good. Thank you for tuning in to the Build Good Fundraising podcast. Fundraising isn't easy, but it should be simple. So on this show, we try to take the mystery out of raising money. Now, on every episode, we coach you to build your fundraising like a flywheel. And the flywheel has 5 steps. Number 1 is listening to donors. Number 2 is engaging donors. Number 3 is asking the right people for the right things. Number 4 is celebrating every single gift. Number 5 is reporting back in a responsive way, as much in the moment as possible. Now, if you master the 5 parts of the flywheel, your fundraising flywheel will start to spin reliably with less effort on your part. Your revenue will grow, and so will your career, quite frankly. Now, every week we focus on one part of the flywheel, except on the weeks where we focus on multiple parts of the flywheel, which is today. Today, we are actually focusing on how you can use the flywheel as an approach to make your fundraising events suck less. And not only suck less, but also be an amazing tool that you can use to not only raise money, but also find new donors, find new mid-level and major level donors, and build a more sustainable fundraising machine over the long term. And I'm joined by Caitlin Padani. She's the lead of the Fundraising Academy. You've heard her before in the podcast. Caitlin, welcome back.
Thank you. I am so excited to talk events today. And I'm so excited because I used to hate events so much. And I love the way that the flywheel makes them less awful. And I'd like anyone who's listening right now to raise their virtual hand if when you told someone you work in fundraising, they say, "Oh, you plan events." And then really we know that there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, so it could be that events have that reputation for a reason, right? Like you talk to fundraisers, we all seem to not like events. We've all been there, Caitlin, where we used to hate events. It could be that events are just hard to pull off. Could also be that we've been doing them wrong. It could be that there's a better way to do it. So my promise, our promise to you is that you're gonna walk away at the end of this episode with a very clear framework on how to, I think, be a lot more excited about your next event because what it can do for you and your organization. And you're also going to walk away hearing a coaching call with an organization that was working on their next event. And in the Fundraising Academy, we get into some of that strategy. How does that sound, Caitlin?
I love it. I'm so excited to share it. I would love to hear, Mike, as we get started, a little bit of your history with events. How do you feel about it? What have you seen in sort of the old way of doing events?
Yeah, so maybe we'll start here. Maybe like the old way of doing events is that you create this event. It could be a gala, it could be like a concert or something, and you really think like, what can we put on stage that would attract a lot of people? And you spend a bunch of money up front, booking an artist or like booking a speaker, booking a venue. And it's a giant exercise in like having faith that people will show up. And you invite as many people as possible and you promote it and market it as well as you can. And then basically you pray for good attendance. You hope that there's no snowstorm or no rain that day, or you hope that like there's not a big game on that day. You hope that the playoffs don't somehow like you all these things got to work in your favor for people to come out. And if you're selling tickets, you are just like praying for these tickets to sell. And there's like three weeks before the event, and you're only half sold, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know what's gonna happen. Like if 200 people don't buy these tickets in the next 3 weeks, we're going to lose so much money on this thing.
Who's going
And
to eat all the rubber chicken if they don't come?
yeah, and at the event, it's going to look sad. The room is going to look half full, as we're going to look like a giant failure. And so then the event comes around, the evening comes around, and then you just like hope and pray that you're going to meet your fundraising goal because you need to cover some expenses that maybe you weren't able to cover with sponsorships. And then you need a bunch of revenue because that's one of your main fundraisers for the year and that carries you throughout the year. And so a ton of pressure on this one event. And during COVID, we saw organizations that were raising millions and that were relying on a single event. That turned out to be a single point of failure because they couldn't have the event and then the money didn't come in. So that is oftentimes the way events are run. And that can be super frustrating. And I've run a lot of events in my life. I built a donor base of about 6,000 people just through events. Those were all small events, by the way. Those were not events where thousands of people come at a time. Those were events where 100 people come at a time. It's a lot of elbow grease. Yeah, it requires quite a bit of commitment. And they can suck. They can definitely suck. They have that reputation for a reason.
So here's my other beef with the way that we've sort of historically done events in fundraising, and that is how they are fundraising, but not donor raising. What have you seen in that, and how how we've sort of lost this opportunity to really dig into building our donors and just focusing on like the number that we raised at the event?
Yeah, especially larger events are oftentimes fundraising events, not as much donor raising events, where it's very much like the dollars raised that evening is what makes or breaks the event. And we're thinking a little bit less about the long term. We're thinking a little bit about less about right people in the room for the right reasons. We're thinking a lot more about bums and seats. I need 500 bums and seats because the unit costs of this event, that's how it works out. I'm spending 50 to $150 per seat. And if I don't get that in terms of like people in the room and donations made, then I lose out on a bunch of revenue. There is a better way. That way could be smaller events, and we are working on an upcoming podcast about Jeffersonian dinners. And basically, those are really small events. Those are like events with 12 people or 10 people. But even when you're hosting a large event, 400, 500, 1,000 people, we're doing this right now with the Build Good Summit, where we're hosting a large event. So we're in the middle of this as well. Even there, I think there's a better way to do it.
Okay, let's chat about that then. Let's chat about the way that the fundraising flywheel can impact how we think about events, how we can make them better, and undo some of the stigma maybe around events and why fundraisers can hate them so much.
Yeah, I want to be clear that what we're going to talk about today, it's not less work. It's just different kind of work. Events are always a lot of work. And so you might hear some of the things we're going to talk about and they're like, "Oh, that's uncomfortable." It's just about choosing your hard. Like not enough people coming to the event and it looking empty and not raising enough. That's hard. Doing a bunch of pre-work, listening and engaging to donors is also hard, but it might result in a way better event. So it's just about choosing your hard. Events are hard, generally speaking. It's just about what kind of hard do you want to sign up for. So that's one mindset I want people to understand before we get into it. We can get into the details, into the framework. I want to get there, but broad strokes, just like first principles of what a better event might be when you're thinking about this is have the mindset of what if we create an event that is the physical embodiment of our mission? We talk about our mission a lot. This is why we exist. Well, what if people could like touch, see, feel, interact with your brand? It's
So
not just
like a golf tournament, right?
it's the opposite of a golf tournament.
We love golf tournaments in the right context, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Unless you're an organization that helps like underprivileged children become pro level golfers or something, like then golf tournament makes total sense, right? But Greenpeace used to run these events where donors would be invited to the harbor to one of their like workshop sort of stations, and there would be these boats hanging from the wall. They were still wet, like people had just come off of the water sorry, not Greenpeace, the rescue mixing up organizations here. One of the rescue charities in Europe, people had just come off the water from a rescue and the boats were still wet. And that was where the gala was held, or the gala. And so that's very much like, okay, this is a physical embodiment of my mission. People are in this space. And maybe you don't have that kind of space, but just think about like what are your values? What is written on your walls? And what would an event look like that is like somebody experiences your brand, experiences your organization, your mission, your values. That's number one. And then almost think of the event. The event is almost like an excuse to engage a lot of donors. It doesn't have to be an event, but if it is an event, almost use the event as an excuse to get to do a lot of listening to donors, a lot of engaging with donors, a lot of one-on-ones with donors that come out of the event. So think about the work that you do before the event and the work that you do after the event as being just as important as the event itself. And I think that might unlock a lot for you. And then really think about how can I make this something that my most valued supporters will find so much value in that they will want to bring family and friends. They will want other people to be part of this. And that doesn't have to be a fancy dinner. That can be a lot of different things. But like, what would my ideal supporters and my loyal supporters, what would they love to bring family and friends to? Because that will start to unlock some of the bums and seats problems that you might have. And using the actual evening just as a chance to book as many one-on-ones as possible for after the event. That's generally speaking, let's have that mindset. And now we can get into, okay, well, how do I actually make that whole thing happen?
Absolutely. I love thinking about events where when the event is done, you've cleaned up, step one is done. And now you have everything else that comes to follow is what's going to happen next with the event is that's where the magic can really happen. So,
Yeah, that's where the magic happens and where a lot of the money, frankly, comes from. Might not be at the actual event at that evening. It might be all the follow-up work that you get to do, all those relationships that you get to cultivate.
so let's dig into the flywheel and what this can look like for an event. You know, I love to get super practical. So let's start. And where would you start with an event when it comes to the flywheel?
The flywheel always starts with listen and engage. And we also say it always ends with listen and engage. There's nothing more important in your fundraising you can do than to listen and engage. And when we talk about listening, we often talk about qualitative and quantitative. So data and donor conversations. Those are the two ways that you can listen to donors. Each one on their own is a low resolution picture. You put them together, you have a high resolution picture. The data can tell you what the data is. It cannot tell you why the data is. Only conversations can then tell you why the data is the way it is. So let's start with listen and engage. The actual event starts way in advance of the actual event. The actual event might even start before you have a venue. It might even start before you know what the program is gonna look like. It might even start before you have a date. The actual event might start with you surveying a bunch of your donors who came to your last event and really asking them for a few things. Asking them, what did you really appreciate? What do you remember about the last event? What were some opportunities where maybe you felt like it could have been better? If you read a book called The Mom Test, it will give you such a good attitude in how to listen to donors because it's a lot less about asking donors, what do you want to see in an event? Or it's a lot less about asking donors, we're planning to do this. Do you think that's a good idea? And it's a lot more about, because people are very terrible at predicting their future behavior. Turns out the only thing we're good at is describing some of our experiences in the past. And even then, we sometimes get it wrong. But basically asking donors, walk me through an event that you really liked. Why was it memorable? What did you enjoy about it? Walk me through an event that you remember. What's the most memorable event you've been to? What made it special? So it starts by asking donors these kinds of questions for two reasons. One, you get a lot smarter about what you might be able to do. But two, they're now helping you co-create the event. And so now they're part of this thing. And you can be very open and honest with them and be like, we're thinking of hosting an event in the fall. I want to make sure it's something that is very valuable to you because you're an appreciated member of our team here as a supporter. And so I'm just having these conversations to help us put on the best event that we can. And I promise I'll keep you updated along the way. And some of the stuff that you're going to tell me today, the conversation we're going to have, it's actually going to influence how we might shape this event. Is that something that you're up for? Is that a way that you could consider helping us? And I'll find that a lot of people, you might find that a lot of people will be like super helpful and super interested in sharing their opinions with you.
People love giving their opinions, which is one of the really fun things about listening and engaging. And I really want to hone in on one part that you said, and that's asking people to describe a positive experience they've had. I think that can give us so much valuable data. I think our brains are wired to focus on problems and how we can solve problems. And so asking people to say, hey, what could we look at, and or what has worked well for you in the past? I think that's really great. And the second one is when people give their opinions, they feel engaged and people want to help. People as we when we look at philanthropy as a whole, as a in the heart of people who are givers, they want to be able to give their money, they want to be able to give their opinions, and I think it's such a valuable way of being able to bring people in and let them actually help, not just feel like they're helping
Right.
right from the start.
Yeah. And hopefully it begins to build a bit of a sense of ownership in this event for them as well. I might be a little bit more likely to go to something that I was part in creating, even if it was a small thing, right? Plus, I'm beginning to think about this. I know you're gonna start talking to me about an event. I would also ask donors, did you ever bring family or friends to an event in the past? And what was your reason? What do you think would happen? How did it go? Um, Start asking some of those questions as well. You really just want to ask donors about past behavior and their feelings about it and what they remember about it. So you're just getting a good scan for how might you be able to build a memorable event and a positive experience.
So getting super practical again for the executive director who's listening right now and says, "Yes, I'm all in. I want to listen and engage." How are they doing it? Are they picking up the phone? Are they calling people? Are they sending out a survey? What are we doing to listen and engage before the event?
Yeah, the gold standard would be the phone, but we may not always have the time to do that or the staff or the capacity. So we can always segment active supporters or people who've come to past events or people we would like at the event. And we can send a 9-word email that just says like, hey, Caitlin, we're starting to plan an event. It's a very important initiative. Do you have 5 minutes to share your advice and opinions on what might make this event successful? I would love to hear from you. And then just like let people reply if they're interested. You may have to send a few of those. You can also do a survey. You can do a 3-question survey, and where the main meat of the survey is an open text box. Again, asking them one or a few of these same questions that we just went through. The important thing is that when people do give you time, advice, answers, opinions, is to circle back to them, thank them, and let them know. I will let you know how we've like incorporated some of this advice as we go along here. And what if you treat this event almost as a building in public thing, where like people feel like they get like drip updates from you on how things are coming along, and almost think about it as reality TV. It sounds so silly for an event, but almost think about this like if this was a reality TV show, like and you follow the season and you're wondering where this is gonna go, just make it a little bit fun like that in your own head. If you
I
want some of that humor to spill over into donor communications, I think that's fine depending on the organization, but you almost have to think about it that way.
I just want a gold chalice. That's all I ask for. Those who know, that's my reality TV request. Okay, so we've listened and engaged donors before the event. The event is coming up.
Yeah.
How are we going to ask? What is
There's
that?
one listen and engage piece I forgot to talk about, which is sponsors.
Yes.
You have to do the same thing with sponsors. Creating a sponsorship package and then emailing 50 people is lowers your chance of success. A much higher chance of success is doing the same with sponsors. Being like, walk me through an event that gave the most value to you as a sponsor. What did they do right? What really worked for you? When you look at sponsoring events, what do you look for? How do you evaluate a successful sponsorship? How do you evaluate a successful partnership? If and only if you end up sponsoring our event and the event is over and you and I are sitting here again and we're clinking our glasses and we're saying cheers to a great partnership and you say that was amazing. We would love to sponsor this thing every single year. What would have happened for you to feel that way? And then ask for permission to come back with draft one and call it a draft. Don't come back with a set proposal. Be like, can I put some of these things you get, like some of this feedback, can I put that together into a draft and we review it together? And then you tell me how far off I am. And by the way, what boxes, if I come back with this draft, what boxes does it need to tick? What all needs to be in this thing? And very much treat it like a co-creating thing. Your chances just go up, go way up of securing sponsorships. When you give somebody just like the bronze, silver, gold, whatever package, and like here's what you get, it's way too easy for somebody to say no, none of these work for us. Sorry.
Who in the organization should be having those sponsorship conversations?
It might be the CEO if it's a small organization, or it might be the corporate fundraiser or the major gifts fundraiser. Yeah. Um, I do think, generally speaking, if you think that some of these sponsors have like they're like a high value contact that could provide a lot in the future, I think it's very smart to have the CEO in at least one or two of those conversations.
Nice. Okay.
Hey, we'll be right back. But before we do, are you struggling to grow your revenue? Are you kind of feeling stuck and like everything you're doing maybe isn't quite working the way that you wanted it to? Well, fear not, because you're not alone. And maybe all you need is to be among your people and get some ideas from what is working for other frontline fundraisers right now. That's why we're putting on the Build Good Summit. It's happening May 22 to 23, 2025 in downtown Toronto. You're going to gather with other frontline fundraisers who are going to show you exactly. Hey, we'll be right back. But before we do, are you struggling to grow your revenue? Are you kind of feeling stuck and like everything you're doing maybe isn't quite working the way that you wanted it to? Well, fear not, because you're not alone. And maybe all you need is to be among your people and get some ideas from what is working for other frontline fundraisers right now. That's why we're putting on the Build Good Summit. It's happening May 22 to 23, 2025 in downtown Toronto. You're going to gather with other frontline fundraisers who are going to show you exactly what they're working on, what is working for them, what they've tried that didn't work, why they failed, what they learned from it. You're going to go behind the scenes of organizations like UNA.
Let's move on to the 20% of the flywheel that gets 80% of most of our time when it comes to fundraising, the ask.
The ask. Okay. So the night of the event is here, or the day of the event. Could be a breakfast gala. It's here. Everybody's in the room, and you want to raise some money, right? And there's a few different asks I think you should focus on in the room. We'll get to the ask, the big ask on stage. It's very important. We'll get to that. There's a few different asks, though. First of all, before you're getting into any of these asks, you need to know who's in the room. You need to have done your research beforehand. You need to know where they're sitting if it's assigned seating. If not, you need to have looked them up on LinkedIn. This sounds very like this is just what it takes. You need to look them up on LinkedIn, grab their headshot, put it on a Word doc, put their name beside it, print it out. Make sure that your relationship players know who the high value contacts are that they need to connect with at that event. Don't leave that up to chance.
Our
Don't leave
friend
it
Carissa calls that being creepy for good. So you can lean into that a little bit.
creepy for good. Yeah. Know who you want to talk to. Have a plan. Don't just leave it up to chance to like, oh, I'm going to mingle and hopefully I'm going to meet some interesting people who are interested. Don't leave that up to chance. Know who's going to be in the room. Have done your research. Assign a portfolio to different people. And those people are going to make sure to be very intentional to connect with those people. Some organizations deal with this in the seating chart. They put a relationship player at every table. That relationship player knows exactly who they're going to be sitting with, and they have a plan. But that's one thing. Be prepared. Know who's going to be in the room. They're here for 1, 2, or 3 hours. And everything you do now can result in an amazing partnership going forward. And your only job is to try to secure a follow-up meeting. And I'm not saying that the ask should be like, hey, can I meet with you next week? But maybe, right? Like have a conversation, see if they're interested. Uh, Ask them what they're thinking about the event. Ask them who brought them, why they came. You can told it's a fair question to be like, hey, I'm just wondering, like coming to one of these events is kind of a rare thing to do. Most people don't go to fundraising events. What brought you out here today? Why are you here? Because it's amazing that you're here. Just curious. And so that ask number one is I want to earn the right during that evening to have a follow-up meeting with you. I'll take you out for coffee. Maybe I'll ask for a 7-minute Zoom call. Maybe I'll ask for lunch. Maybe I'll ask, would you be open if I came by your office in the next 2 weeks? And we talked a little bit more about this. But that's ask number one. Probably the most important ask is not the ask from the stage, but the ask that is happening individually one-on-one. Number two is the ask for non-attendees. This is an overlooked ask. But if you're inviting all of your donors, let's say you're inviting 5,000 people, hoping that 800 will show up. That leaves 4,200 people who were invited, who couldn't come to the event for one reason or another. There's no reason why you still can't ask them to contribute. There's no reason why the CEO can't send an email at 6:18 p.m. with the subject line about to go on stage and say, hey, I know you're not here today. Wish you could have been here tonight. I'm about to go on stage. Here's a real problem. Here's a solution. Here's roughly what it will cost. This is what we're hoping to raise tonight. Even though you're not here, I still want you to be part of this. It's an important project. It's an important initiative. Do you still consider making a gift? There's no reason you can't do that. Most of us just forget about people who aren't in the room. But maybe we can still involve them that way. That's the
Yeah,
second.
I think creating that FOMO, the fear of missing out of the event as well, is super valuable on both ends, both the asking so people know that they're still involved and still included, but also knowing, yeah, these events were fun and maybe one day I'd want to go to one myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the ask of the attendees who are not there. We have the ask of the people who are around the table and getting those one-on-one conversations set up for later. What about the stage? When we get up to the stage, someone's getting up, they have a microphone. What does that ask look
Right.
like?
So typically they say, I'm so and so. I've been with the organization for this many years. And this organization has been around for 40 years. This is a very important year because it's actually our 40th anniversary. We've come such a long way. And I just really want to challenge you to go watch one, two, or three TED Talks and be like, what if this was a TED Talk? What if I have 18 minutes to convince you that we need to put a human on the moon and we need to like build Apollo 11 or something. And this is such an important mission. Here's why it matters. And I need you to be a part of this mission. Like, what if you think about it that way? And I think you would have a lot more success. Craft your speech like a TED Talk and follow the framework of an offer. It is an offer. When you're on stage, it's like a direct mail letter. It's like an ad. It's like an email. You're just delivering it on stage. But you need to go up there and you need to make sure that everyone in that room is captivated from the first sentence that you say. So start with a strong hook. Start with a strong hook. Like reel somebody in. Either start with a provoking question, start with a problem statement, start with an unfinished sort of story beginning. Um, don't waste time by being like the MC is going to introduce you. They're going to tell them your name. They're going to tell them your position. When you're up there, no throat clearing. Go right into it. These 18 minutes count. And then deliver the offer. The offer is a problem. that problem has negative consequences if it isn't solved. There are real stakes at play here. If we don't fix this problem, bad stuff is going to happen. But good news, we have a solution. Outline the solution in a way that everybody can understand. Here's a 3-step plan. Number 1, we're going to do this. Number 2, this happens. And number 3, that happens. There's a desired future outcome. If we're successful, here's what the new world could look like. Notice how this podcast, we structured it. There's an old way of doing events. There's a new way of doing events, right? So talk about the problem right now is the old way, but there's a better way. If we're successful with our solution, here's what the new world looks like. And you can be part of it. In fact, we need you to be part of this mission. So you want people to walk away feeling like you just called them to a very high bar, a very high mission. And it's an important mission. It matters an awful lot. They are so lucky to have been in that room. And for those 18 minutes, they were introduced to a new problem, a new solution, an offer that they want to be part of. They learn something new and they feel like they have lots of agency and they can actually do something about this. That's what you want people to walk away from. And I know it's not easy, but it also isn't super hard. Just pick a really good problem. And you're going to hear a coaching call right after this where we help somebody think this through.
Are we telling everyone at the event that there's one big number? Are we telling them that are we asking them to give a certain amount? What does it look like when we're up there and we're presenting that new promised future that these donors can come along the ride with?
Yeah, maybe a little bit of a nuanced answer here. I don't want to say it depends. It depends a little bit, but generally speaking, as long as the number isn't too high, it's got to be something that feels very achievable with the amount of people that are in the room. Ideally, let's say you say we need to raise $500,000. Ideally, in your listen and engage and pre-event work, you've secured through sponsorships, maybe through some other donors, you've secured some of that already. So you can say we're already at 200K or we're already at 300K. So it really feels like this is doable. So yeah, generally speaking, we throw out a number and we have a very clear offer. Maybe you can do 1,000 tonight, maybe 5,000, maybe 500. However much you're able to do, that's up to you. I just hope you would consider doing something because the consequence of us doing nothing is this.
Wonderful. I think that's such a great way of thinking about it. Being in the room, you have these 18 minutes, just get into it and share the consequences. I think so often I have conversations with fundraisers, with executive directors, nonprofit leaders, and when they're writing it or when they're sharing it in this context where they're going to be writing a letter or sharing a speech, they use this language that feels very safe. And then a few minutes later, I'll have another conversation with them and say, well, what's the problem? Like, children are going to die and people aren't going to have food. And so I think being able to just lean into that and say that, I think we'll hear that a little bit in this conversation that we have in this coaching call too, to really when you dig in and just are able to get to the heart of that problem, that is where this ask comes to life. And I think that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah. Now on the tables, you're likely going to have some sort of reply device. I would also include in that reply device, I would like more information, or I would love to meet with somebody to talk more about this project, or I would like to talk to somebody about a gift of assets or different kinds of giving options. I would include all of those things just to make sure that some people in the room might not be like, yeah, I'll write a $5,000 check, but some might be like, I have a family foundation. I want to be more involved. Please contact me. And those are signals. If somebody says, please contact me, that's a very strong signal that you got to follow up on.
I think that's great. So the night has wrapped up. We have finished listening and engaging on the front end. We have asked, let's go to the next section of the flywheel to celebrating. What does that look like? This is where the real work begins here.
Celebrating is thanking donors. And we say thank before you bank. You might not necessarily be in a position to do that. Maybe you're going to deposit everything the next day or the next few days, but thank really quickly. Sometimes I have thanked donors a week after the event, and I thank them for coming to this concert or whatever, and they had like almost no recollection of it. They're like, "Wait, oh yeah, that was you guys." Like they remembered the artist, but they didn't remember the organization whatsoever, and they were actually like kind of like had already moved on with life. Donors are people that live very rich and fulfilled lives. So think really quickly, and this can't be something you figure out the day after the event. When we say the event starts well before the event starts, that includes a plan on the next day, who's going to process and thank. Doesn't have to be the same people organizing the event. They might be wiped out. But you've got to have that in place, even if it's volunteers. Thank immediately. And if you can, do a post-event survey. Whenever you can, rate the donor experience. Ask them to fill out a survey where it doesn't have to be long, but you want feedback on what worked really well and what were some suggestions for improvement and any other feedback they want to leave you. You want to score that. You will learn a ton, and people give you the most salient, fresh information right after the event. If you remember, we started this podcast by saying ask people to walk through a past experience, and even then, sometimes they get it wrong. They're not going to get it as wrong if it's the next day or the next 2 days. Like they're going to remember how they felt that evening. So rich information, high value information.
And
Um,
and like you said, a week later is too late. It really needs to be that next day. And so you have the survey prepped beforehand. It's ready to go out. You even have the email scheduled. It's ready to go.
Then I would like the reporting is the next. So you want to close the loop, right? We wanted to raise this much. A week or two later, you might know where you're at. Report back. Let them know how the evening performed. Even if you didn't meet your goal, that's fine too. Let them know you're close to goal, you're not there yet. If you still want to contribute, there's time, right? So report back and go right back to listening and engaging. Looking at the data, I would look at people who haven't given as much this year as last year. I would put them in a bucket of like, I want to call them. And I would look at people who gave quite a bit more than last year, and I put them in a bucket, I want to call them. And what I want to call them about, again, is being like, can you help me evaluate the event? Um, was it valuable for your friends and family? What was the best part about it? You can say like walk me through your high-low buffalo, something we do as a family. High is just like what was the best part, low is like what could be improved, and buffalo is like what was surprising, what did you not expect? And that's just neutral. It can be a really good surprise or it can be not so good surprise, but that's just this is just the buffalo that came out of nowhere. So you can also follow that framework and just be like, let's do a high-low buffalo.
And then, so we've gone through the whole fundraising flywheel. We have closed the loop on this event. What do we do as a team? We're sitting here. We have done all of this work afterwards. We've had all these follow-up calls. How do we close up this event in a good way?
Yeah, we make a plan for the next one. While it's still fresh in our minds, we do an after action review. We've done a podcast on an after action review, but we do an internal after action review. Ranks don't matter, positions don't matter. We're all peers when we're doing the after action review, and we walk through what was supposed to happen, what actually happened, why did the thing that actually happened happen the way that it happened, what can we learn for next time? And we might learn that we don't want to do it again, and that's fine too. Or we might be like, you know what, that list and engage thing at the front end, that really made a ton of difference. Maybe we need to do even more of that next time.
Absolutely. Okay, so up next, we have something really fun. And I think, believe the first time on the Build Good podcast, we have a clip from a coaching call from our Fundraising Academy. And this is a call that we have. Our fundraising jam happens every single Thursday. We have copy clinic every single Tuesday. And this is where we gather fundraisers together and people get to ask questions and work through their challenges. So in this one, you will get to hear Lauren, and she was preparing for an event for the first time. She was a self-professed event hater, and but was looking for a way to approach this event differently. So I am excited for you to listen in, get a little sight into the Fundraising Academy, and most importantly, to hear what it looks like to actually work through creating an offer and coming up with an event. So listen in.
Welcome here, Lauren. Nice to meet you. We
Yeah,
haven't actually met before, so
yeah, nice to meet
welcome.
you.
Thanks for
I feel
being
like I
here.
know you because I've listened to your podcast for like
Oh,
ever. So since like 2022. So you asked
wow.
in the 100th episode if someone coming to the business from the podcast, and I was like screaming at my Spotify. I was like, "But I'm here! I'm finally here! It took me 3 years, but I'm finally here." So
Amazing. Thank you. Thanks for being
you're welcome.
a listener all those years and sticking with it.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
we've never done an event before, and I've always been in the mentality of events suck. Let's go actually talk to people, build relationships with people instead of putting everyone on the spot to raise all this money on a specific day for a specific reason. But I didn't win this conversation. My board wanted to like beta test this event. So we do a patient conference every 2 years where it's mostly educational. Mostly we spend a lot of money. Until 2022, we never broke even. It always like our patient conference always costed us a lot of money. And so the last 2 times we've done it, 22 and 24, we did cash flow it. It has been at least a break even spot in our budget instead of us, spending more. But anyway, we've never done like a gala type event or where we've sold tickets and had silent auction and something outside of that conference. But we are trying to launch clinical trials in our disease space. We had some research developments that came to light over the summer. So we feel like it's a good time to say, hey guys, like this whole process in America is commercialized, like to get on people's radars, we've got to be building relationships in that space. And we felt like an event would be a good way. And so far, I feel okay about where we are. I just want to make sure that it's going to be like 80 to 90% of new people that have never really, they're coming to this event because they work at a local hospital and the hospital is sponsoring. So they're sending 50 people. So they're not going to have heard of us. And I'm really bad about assuming that everybody and their mom, no, most of my donors that I talk to every day have been donors for 20 years. And I'm just really bad about how do I do this for a whole new audience that's at ground zero, and making it meaningful for them. And then I've never had to do post-event follow-up like this. So what does that even look like? And surely someone in the academy does events and has a checklist of these are all the things you want to make happen in the room, and then these are the things that you want to do post event, and any resources like that would be really valuable to me.
Cool. All right, there's a lot in there. First of all, you said events suck. Events can suck, but they don't have to suck. A lot of the value in an event is in the before and the after. So using the event as an excuse to get in front of sponsors and donors and that engagement, and then post event, using the event very much as an opportunity to get to know a lot of people. Not too much pressure in the room of raising too much money that evening, but getting to know a lot of people, and then getting a lot of follow-ups booked where you can be more one-on-one, basically. Amriga just ran an event where they surveyed people at the table, basically, if they would be willing to have a follow-up. Amriga, do you want to share a little bit of that before we get into the actual event?
Oh, I think if our table talk, we we put together a card. I had 8 options, which if I had to do it over, I would do 4. But yeah, we had all sorts of things from volunteering to making legacy gifts. And I can look that up and share that at some point.
Lauren, how many people are going to be here?
About 150.
Okay.
Ish.
And they are mostly, there's a table sponsor who's going to bring people?
About 75% of those people are, yes, it's a pharma company or a hospital or someone in the adjacent space.
And would you know the key contact at each, like, are you the one who is getting those table sponsors confirmed?
Not me personally, but I have a committee of people working on this event.
Okay. And with the at that table, is it the key contact who is like the sponsor of the table? Are they the real person you may want to talk to further, or is it also the people that they're bringing?
Yeah, I would say the key contact for sure I would want to do follow up with, and perhaps some of the people they're bringing. It just kind of depends, and that's kind of one of the things that I'm finding challenging is like knowing, okay, this list of people that you gave me that's coming to fill your table, how many of them actually care, or how many of them are just coming to get a free dinner because their boss is paying for it.
Yeah, probably a lot of them fall on that latter spectrum. And that's okay. That is the nature of events.
Right.
But will you know who the key contacts are at each table? Will you know name, contact info?
Yes.
Okay. What communication do you have planned ahead of the event for those?
Email, probably if, I mean, do I need to call them, you think? I mean, I just kind of had planned on email, but if you think I need to call them, then I can do that too. Just to start building that relationship.
Are these high net worth individuals, or do they have decision making powers?
I mean, a lot of them are neurosurgeons, oncologists, like a lot of them are in the medical space. So I would say, yeah, I mean, I'm probably going to be the poorest person in the room, and that's okay with me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the life of a fundraiser. Okay, so chances might be slim that you're even going to reach them if you call them, if these are neurosurgeons and oncologists. And will you have their email though?
I do have their email.
Okay, yeah, I would send them each a personal email, and keep it super short and sweet.
Just to the table leads, right? Like the 12 table leads or whatever. Okay.
Yeah. Keep it super short and sweet, and just be like, "Hey, Joan, yeah, I'll make sure to come and if there I'm trying to find a way of phrasing this. You don't have to phrase it exactly this way. What you're trying to get at is like, if there's anything that would make this event a real win for you, just let me know.
Yeah. Okay.
If there's anything that would make this event a real win for you and the people you're bringing, just let me know. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So some of them might be using their guests as, some of it's just like bringing their team because they have this table. But I don't know, maybe somebody has specific ideas about how it could be a win for the people they're bringing. And then that would be a great opportunity for you to show radical hospitality and create a moment for them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like we're doing like the program is not super stuffy. And we have some videos we're gonna share, and those are really well done. So I'm excited about that. I think I'll host event like postcards or something on my, I mean, they're already on my mailing list, I guess. Once they bought tickets, we did wrangle that in. We did wrangle it opt-in. I mean,
yeah, so post-event, I would send to every attendee that you have an email for, I would like right after the event, I would send like a post-event, like rate your experience type of an email.
Okay.
Where you're just like, Yeah, you're just showing that you want their feedback on how the evening went. What do they appreciate?
Yeah.
What can you learn for next time? Yeah.
So one of the things we do at our conference that's really well received, I just don't know if this has a place for that or if this sounds like too much. We do every family that comes to like our closing dinner or whatever, we have like a step and repeat banner that has our logo on it. We take every family's picture at that step and repeat, like with a Polaroid, and then mail them the Polaroid in a card, like saying thank you for coming to the event. And it's just a fun little touch point afterwards with all the families that attended the conference, because they're spending a lot of money to come to the conference. So like, you know, I feel like the least little personalized touch point. I don't know. I mean, we like things to do as people are coming in. Does that sound like too much for a less personalized?
No.
I mean, a less in.
It could work logistically. Yep. Yep. Great idea. Again, a little moment that you're creating for them. It's great. Let's talk about the actual event. We'll talk about the speech, like what happens on stage, and we'll talk about what happens in the room. Are you giving a talk?
I am giving a talk. I do have a keynote speaker as well. That's a teenager with lived experience with our condition. She goes to a prep school in Boston and is actually leading a global youth speech competition that we're doing right now. So that's like her saying, and she's in Boston. So I'm like, come on. And then we also have a researcher that's doing some of our like preclinical trial work at Boston Children's and Mass General. So she's like one of our table leads and kind of spearheading this whole thing. So,
how long is your talk?
mine, I'm planning like 7 minutes tops.
Okay, got it. And how long is the keynote from the person affected with the?
She has. I told her 5 to 7 minutes.
Okay, and are you before or after?
I am after her.
Okay.
Like I'm introducing her, she's speaking, and then I'm going to stay on stage and talk next. And then the researchers coming. The way we had it planned is the researchers coming after me, but that's like all like 5 to 7 minutes. So like basically half an hour of talking total with everyone, introductions in the middle, all the things.
Okay. What is the researcher talking about?
Just how rare disease is underfunded and how you know, that's a challenge, and really people are who champion rare disease breakthroughs in America. Like it's really crazy that the whole thing is commercialized, and so if it can't make a company a profit, they're not really that interested. So we fund research every day with hot dog eating contests and grandmas that lick my stamps for my thank you notes, because that's what happens. I mean, that's the bringing rare disease advocacy work in America.
Okay. Event on when you make the ask.
I guess that's a thing I need to figure in a keynote, but that's a good question.
Yeah. Is there a very specific piece of research that you're going to be talking about, or like a specific initiative or a breakthrough or?
So we have our patient, like we can't do clinical data, and we launched a mechanism to collect patient data last September. It costs us about $30,000 a year to fund that. And that's a new initiative. So now we're like having to raise that money every year to keep those wheels turning. So that's a huge, I mean, if we could, I mean, not to say that I don't want the pressure of having to raise $130,000 in a room with 200 people that I don't really know that well. But that would be super cool.
Okay, that's 130K?
No, 30,000.
30,000. Okay.
$30,000.
Okay. And how does that data? What does that look like? How are you collecting the data?
So we have a RedCap instance which is like a medical data collection system that we partnered with another organization. So they're funding half the cost and we're funding half the cost. And it's our costs are about $30,000 a year.
Okay. And somebody else is providing the other 30K.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So you've got a match. Okay. Keep that in mind. It's sort of a match. You can talk about the fact that every dollar you give into research, somebody else is also putting in $1. So you just have a matching fund for the event, which is great. Let's talk about other offers. What else are you working on?
We want to do a cutaneous melanoma challenge grant in September. Is all we're short on that.
Okay. What is a challenge grant? What is a challenge grant?
So it's a funding mechanism through the Pediatric Dermatology Research Alliance. They're giving us $12,500 towards it, and then we have to raise the other $12,500, and we've got $5,000 committed towards that already, and we just have that $7,500 left to raise by September.
Okay. All right. What else you got?
I mean, hate to say like overhead, like everyone's doing that, but
How much is that?
About $100,000 a year for my whole team.
Okay. What is your total budget for the year for the organization?
525 in 25.
Okay. On the other end of 525, like that's the total budget for your org.
Everything.
Your research, how many people does it touch or how many people does it benefit?
Patients or patients and their families? What number do you want?
Patients.
About 400 patients.
400 patients. Okay. Those would be patients connected to you in some way?
Okay. That all have the same skin condition.
Okay. The research, the data collection you're doing, that is $30,000 per year to run. With how many patients does that take place?
I mean, ideally, we want all of them in there. Right now, since we launched it, we have about 75 patients whose data we have already collected.
Okay.
But of the patients that we are registered with our organization, which is that 300 and something, we're need to be beating the bushes to get all of them moved into that data set.
Okay. So you're trying to get to the 400 into that data. Okay.
Yeah. And we know that we see the highest need patients, right? Like the patients that we know, I mean, for example, we had an event in New York City, like a meetup in New York City last year. And the person running it was like, well, she was a dermatologist in the clinic there in New York. And she said, well, how many families do you have in New York City proper with your condition? And I said, oh, well, I ran my numbers and I said, oh, well, we have 11 people in our 11 families in our database. And she laughed and she said, Lauren, I see 11 patients on a Wednesday in clinic, like talking about there's a huge portion of patients that she sees that aren't coming to us.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
okay. So 30K data collection for 400 patients. If you have enough data, you can go to clinical trials. How long
when we have enough data?
Okay.
There's going to be pharma companies in the room who we've had conversations with that are on 6 months to kind of get our ish together and be ready for clinical trials.
Okay. So, this is great. Can you do it in 18 to 36 months?
I think we can do it in 24, but I'm ambitious to a fault, Mike.
That's great. Fantastic. And all you need is the money?
Money and bodies.
Yeah. Does the money buy bodies?
Sure, it does. 5 FTE to a team of.
Why are you at the organization?
I'm sorry?
Why are you at the organization?
Why am I? My youngest daughter was born with this condition in 2017. We had lightning strike in that delivery room. No doctor in my Arkansas rural hospital knew what the hell this was and couldn't give me any answers for 6 months. And it was absolutely terrifying, especially when my 6-month-old started having seizures, and neurological complications are indicative of the worst complications of this condition. And sometimes some of those can be fatal. So it was absolutely terrifying. So pursue a passion project, and clinical trials just won't stop.
What will the clinical trials make possible?
Kids a year from this condition, hopefully create some broader awareness. And I truly think that by study, because our kids have a genetic predictor melanoma research community.
So the clinical trials, what will they, at the other end of clinical trials, what happens? Treatment, medicine?
We'll have treatment options for the first time ever that aren't surgical. My daughter's CMN covers about the size of her palm on her face, and they wanted to do 8 surgeries over, and this would create a biologic where it would just simply just turn off the cells that are producing the excess melanin.
Okay.
At least that's what's happening in rats in London. So can we make it happen in humans in the United States?
Okay. All right. So for your speech, we're going to stay away from the rats in London, but we're going to focus on everything else that you just said.
Okay.
So first of all, I believe that you can raise 30K that evening. I don't want to sound like unrealistic, but like I think you should very much like come into this evening with the belief, the goal, the mindset, the attitude, and the posture that you're going to raise the 30K and more.
Got it.
And so you need to believe that, your team needs to believe that, you just need to act that way that evening. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah.
I just like you just need to embody that evening. This evening is the physical embodiment of your mission. It is the interact with your mission. It is the lived experience of who your organization is for most people. So that needs to be the vibe in the room. 7 minutes is not a long time, but you can do a ton in 7 minutes.
Okay.
So here's how I suggest that you go about it. All the questions that I just asked you are basically the building blocks of a great offer. And you get it out there on that stage. The only job that your speech has is to deliver an offer and ask somebody to take you up on that offer. It's not to educate them. It is not to
make them cry and write big checks.
Offer does, right? So the speech is a vehicle to do that. Here's how I would start with your personal story at the very front end. A lot of mistakes speakers make when they get up there, they're like, my name is so-and-so, I'm the CEO. Think of this like the first opening line of a great book, right?
Okay.
Like you get up there and it's like Dickens, it was the best of times. Like have a hook, have a lead that is like that. And you actually had one. Your daughter was born in a rural Arkansas hospital. It was like lightning in the operating room. Born, nobody knew what to do with this. Start there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then talk about your journey, about how then you go into the wider problem. Now you say, actually, there's this many kids, these many parents in America that this happens to every single day. And then you get into, you're going to go into a constant back and forth. You're going to talk about what could be, and you're going to talk about what is right now. What could be, but what is right now. And you're going to paint this gap between the two. Okay? Like the future is very possible. Like we're 18 to 36 months away from clinical trials that will make sure that there's non-invasive treatments for kids. And then you tell then you go back to your story. My daughter only had this condition, like it was only like the size of her, but what did you say?
Her palm her palm. It's like the size of her palm under her cheek. Like
yeah,
right here.
Size of her palm on her cheek, right? And they wanted to do 8 operations. In 18 to 36 months, it's possible that we're running clinical trials to make sure that that doesn't need to happen. So keep
Yeah.
going back until what the reality is right now and what it could be in 18 to 36 months. And talk about the stakes. Here's what happens if we don't get to these clinical trials, though. Right?
Mhm. Yeah.
This many kids will continue to die, blah, blah, blah. And then you go into the only cost $30,000 to get us to these clinical trials in the next 18 to 36 months. In fact, there's
Yep.
people in this room right now who are pharmaceuticals or pharma companies who are going to run those trials if we can get them the data in the next 18 to 36 months.
Mhm.
We already have 75 patients. We know the remaining 300 and some that we need to reach. It costs about, who did the math? Somebody did the math. We don't do public math in the academy, just so you know.
It
But
was $250 per person if
Yeah.
it was 120 people there.
yeah, so it either takes about 250 if everybody in this room makes a gift of $250, we're there, or you take the 400 patients that you're trying to reach. So you take $30,000, you divide that by 400 patients, 75. Takes about $75 to get the data collection from one patient.
How many patients do you want?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. How many patients? Yeah, and make the goal $30K for that evening, and be like, the best part is that every dollar that you invest into research tonight, somebody else is matching you. So for every one patient
Mhm.
that you're going to help, a second patient will be helped as well.
Yep.
And then be like, listen, I'm going to, if you give tonight, I promise you I'm going to make your gift count. And I promise you I'm going to keep you updated. You will be the first to know when we go to clinical trials because we reached it. But thank you, Lauren, for letting us share that little glimpse into a coaching call in the Fundraising Academy. Thank you, Caitlin, for joining us today. If people want to learn more about the Fundraising Academy, if they're like, man, that sounds kind of cool, I would love to do that every week. I would love to get some coaching, some training, some feedback. Where can they go?
Absolutely. buildgood.com/academy is where you can find all the information, and you can book a call to chat with our team. I would love to have a virtual fundraising coffee with you and see if it might be something that could be a good fit for you and helping you reach your organizational goals.
Nice. Well, that wraps it up for us today. Here's my short action plan for you. If you are organizing events, if that is in your future plans or your current plans, I just want you to take a piece of paper. I want you to write down, listen, engage, ask, celebrate, report. And I just want you to write a quick plan for each of them. Doesn't have to be long, on how you're going to run the flywheel to actually listen and engage to donors ahead of the event, and then how you're going to celebrate and report back on the back end of the event. And then I want you to watch a couple of TED Talks, and I want you to think about your ask as a TED Talk that has a clear offer, a clear problem, clear stakes, a clear solution. That solution is easy to understand. There's 3 steps. It's costed out. There's a overall large number you're trying to get to, and then that breaks down into smaller shares of what everyone can do. And then the future, what should the future reality, the future desired outcome look like? That's what I want you to do. If you want to be notified of future podcasts, subscribe to this podcast. If you want to get our stuff, some of our tactics, our advice, we share as much as we can. Just go to buildgood.com, sign up anywhere there with your email address. It all goes to the same place. If you're listening to this, you're my kind of people. I'm your kind of people. Thank you for the work you do. I'm your host, Mike Dirksen, cheering you on as you do good in the world.